And I think young men coming into this who aren't responsible for all the problems in the world feel a deep sense of betrayal by their community when it's okay to say these things about white males. Um, but it's now not even okay to use the wrong pronoun for somebody mistakenly. That's enough to get you canceled, but you can pile on white men because they have power, supposedly. So APA defines bias as, uh, I'm trying to unblock my screen from this so I can read effectively. Uh, Prejudice or stereotyping based on gender. It can be conscious or unconscious. It can affect how people behave towards each other. Um, Favoritism towards or prejudice against particular gender. Oxford Languages. Unfair difference in the way women and men are treated. As a matter of experience, however, for men, speaking as a white male, it is in academia a sense of intense double standards. For example, consider this article that got lots of praise from the Dixon, Dickinsonian. The Dickinsonian is the Dickinson College newspaper. And it treats men with the most contempt, and it taps into a series of things that are now said about men that you could never say about any other group in academia. And I think young men coming into this who aren't responsible for all the problems in the world feel a deep sense of betrayal by their community when it's okay to say these things about white males. Um, but it's now not even okay to use the wrong pronoun for somebody mistakenly. That's enough to get you canceled, but you can pile on white men because they have power, supposedly. It wasn't always this way. And having been a child of an academic, I knew the stories of women in academia. Um, the scholarship rightfully focused on women and their problems. And I got very much into this in my work on stereotype threat, where we were examining the effects of what is it like to be outnumbered when you are in a math class as a woman. The mere presence of males is enough to impair your cognitive functioning. And as the ratio of women to men increases, that gets less intense. What you don't want to be is in the situation that Dee Dee described, which is the lone male, because there you're under the spotlight and you're being scrutinized, and anything you do or say is remembered more. These biases, however, have received very little attention over time. We're just now, in the last 10 years, starting to look at the outcomes of boys falling behind. But when we were working on girls' issues, we could have easily said, why are boys behind in other areas? But we didn't. The master narrative was women are getting hurt in society. Let's level the playing field. Um, Black males have consistently been underrepresented in educational professions, and there's limited discussion of their maleness. It's mostly their blackness that is discussed. We know, and Dee Dee talked about this, that discrimination is psychologically and professionally harmful. Um, this, I think, one of the windows into this research that's most powerful is the work on belonging. Um, so we've known for a long time that if you merely make somebody temporarily uh, feel like they're going to be alone, if you give them information that suggests that even in the future somebody is going to reject them, you can measure impairment on an IQ test that follows. That's research by Roy Baumeister and his colleagues. Um, Loneliness and social isolation aren't good for the brain. In fact, the effects of loneliness may be, uh, in many cases, are worse than other diseases that you would think of as life-threatening. Loneliness definitely has power of its own, including the risk of dementia. Uh, Men are more than twice as likely to die by suicide, as we heard, significant underrepresentation in mental health research, significant stigma in seeking help and support. Um, the landscape has changed so remarkable in academia that it's breathtaking. It's breathtaking. So when my father was a professor, he fought to get the first woman into psychology back in the early 1960s. Um, these days, the narrative of women's underperformance in science domains has very much changed. So, for example, a study found this is Steve Ceci, who was one of the premier researchers on gender and science, did an adversarial collaboration with somebody who totally disagrees about the effect of bias. So they agreed on what to look at. What they found was that for tenure track sciences in psychology across the board, women were getting hired more often. They were getting their papers accepted to journals just as often as men, and their recommendation letters were just as strong. There was a slight difference, however, in how much they were paid. It- so this mirrors what I see, and what Dee Dee talks about, that our landscape is becoming, the men are sort of going extinct in it. This is an old, and yet the old narratives about what it's like for women in the academy have not changed as much. In the Mad Men days, Ellen Brashad said they were explicitly barring women, and you had to fight to get a woman into certain programs. And what was interesting about that, she went to the University of, she ended up going to grad school, I think, at the University of Minnesota. And what's interesting about low numbers of anyone in an environment is that people explain those numbers. So why aren't there more women around here? Well, the real reason is that you have a low opinion of women. The What Burchard had to listen to was how theories by psychologists of why women were ill suited to the field of psychology. So they came up with a biological explanation for why there weren't more women in psychology. And what shows that it's a social phenomenon, as Dee Dee said, is the rapid amount of change that occurs. So I'll take you to these two pie graphs. It's a total reversal. It's a total reversal. And now we're saying, in a way, the message around where I do my work at NYU, it's not a biological argument. But it is very personal. Men aren't good at this. Men aren't good at what we do, and they are toxic. And that's a ridiculous point of view, and yet one that's increasingly hard to speak back to because you're just simply outnumbered, and it's easier just to not talk about it.